While we are probably quite a ways off from Part 2 of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, it's not to say we've gotten nothing from the developers on not just Part 1, but the future with Part 2. In a recent Famitsu interview with Tetsuya Nomura, Yoshinori Kitase, Hamaguchi, and Toriyama, they all spoke about the story of Part 1 and its changes, and even spoke a brief bit about the current development of Part 2, as well as the future changes to the story of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Some of these might make some of you hope for the future, but some may leave you a little bit uneasy, to put it lightly. Before we start, there are going to be spoilers in here for the plot of Final Fantasy VII Remake's story, so be warned. One more thing before we get started. Since Famitsu is a Japanese publication and these interviews were released in Japanese, translations come from this Twitter user, Itekimochi. So go give her a follow as she did a great job translating all of this, and she's been translating interviews like these for a long while, so she deserves the support. Alrighty, you all ready? With that said, let's mosey. I'm going to go in order the stuff I found most interesting from her timeline in order, so I won't be going over things like the fan polls that were shown in there, where fans could choose their favorite characters from the remake and things like that. Starting off here, we have a bit from the game's producer, Yoshinori Kitase, when talking about the changes to the story of Final Fantasy VII for Final Fantasy VII Remake. The question asked was, FF7R really digs deep into the original game's story, but there is a surprising development towards the end of the game. With remakes, there's always a faction of people who don't want anything changed, but there are also those who actually want things to be changed. Were the discussion amongst the creators on whether or not you should change things? Kitase responded with, Director Nomura as well as co-director Hamaguchi and Toriyama hoped to keep all of the parts of the original the fans have come to love. However, we wanted to add several surprises that would balance out the story too. I'm sure there are people who wish to experience the exact same story and relive memories. However, if we were to do that, then all we would be doing is just adding to the original experience, which would cause the remake to lose its significance. I think we were able to successfully revive the story using the latest technology for the new generation of a, quote, new Final Fantasy VII. Lastly, is there anything you would like to say to the readers? The new Final Fantasy VII story has just begun. Please look forward to the story from here on out. I want to stick to this for a bit here, as it's easily one of the most talked about things from the interview. Now, in my opinion, I think that Part 1, for the most part, did do a great job at expanding the story of Midgar up until that last hour or so. I feel that they've changed so much in that last hour that, at this point, it's hard to see them just sticking to the original story almost completely with only a few key differences. If the gang is changing fate in Part 1, but Aerith still ends up dying and all the characters play out the exact same way, then what was the point of them even changing fate? On top of that, things like the Singularity, time-traveling Sephiroth, Zack being alive in another timeline, it's so much that I'm honestly nervous where they could go with it. Now we have another section here dedicated to Nomura. The interviewer asks the exact same question they asked Kitase about changing the story. Nomura responded with, since the concept of Final Fantasy VII Remake was already decided from the beginning, there wasn't that much discussion. However, since each individual had different ways of perceiving things, we did discuss exactly how far we will change the story. I believe I was the one who actually put a stop on several ideas towards the latter half of development. The next question was, the remake contains the Whispers of Fate that are not present in the original story, but what was the intent of having this presence? In English, they're called the Whispers, but in Japanese, they're called the Feelers. Is there a specific reason for this difference? For example, if the word feeler was the origin of the name. God, I can't get over that. Nomura replied with, Nojima actually requested us to give the Whispers an eerie aura. Initially, the Whispers were designed to be made out of small particles of sand to create their shape, which gave them an uncertain form. We then created an image of them wearing a robe, but more so than that, when we had to make a lot of them appear, that's when their form took a clear shape. The word feeler means to sense and to touch, but at the moment I cannot say any more than that. I will say, I am happy with the final design that they went for the Whispers, even if I wasn't the biggest fan of them personally from the story perspective. Their design's just plain creepy and gives off this really uneasy feeling. Out of everything with the Whispers, I think they did a great job with the design. The next question is a little bit interesting though. Those who come into contact with Aerith can see Whispers, right? Also, was Aerith able to see them from the very beginning? Nomura said, people can see the Whispers when they come into contact with Aerith. However, at the moment, I am unable to tell you when Aerith started seeing them. This does prove a theory people have had for a little while now, that this is how everyone saw them. Though there's one thing that doesn't make sense. Rufus in Chapter 17 in particular does see them while Sang doesn't. But we never actually saw him get into any physical contact with Aerith, and I'm assuming Sang would have at some point. So was this just an oversight? It could be as simple as them adding a scene later of Rufus meeting Aerith, but at the moment, Rufus seeing them is completely unanswered and doesn't make sense. We have an next bit here from Hamaguchi here who talks a bit about the development of Part 2 currently and how it's proceeding. Hamaguchi said, the first installment of the Final Fantasy VII Remake Project was centered around Midgar, and we strive to recreate a Midgar that you could not experience in the original story, showcasing the hustle and bustle of the lives of the people there, as well as the environment. The next installment will then shift to the other parts of the world, since the characters have escaped from Midgar in the story. We hope to create a game that allows you to experience the charm and allure of the world of Final Fantasy VII from the various lives of the people, as well as the environments that will be present. Production for the next installment is already underway, and our team is putting their all into the advancement of the next game. Although there is still a wait, we hope that you can look forward to what we have in store. I am still wondering where exactly Part 2 is going to end off at. Story-wise, I think it makes the most sense to end off at Aerith's death, but that might be too much for that point in the project. There is a lot that leads up to that point after Midgar. On the other hand, I feel having anything before that might cause the game to have more parts than most people want. I personally still hope for at least 3 parts in the end. It's great to hear that the development is still going strong, especially with everything going on right now. When asked about the development and release of the next installment, Nomura said, quote, "We know that everyone wants the next installment quickly. We would also like to deliver it as soon as possible. Since we were able to see the line of quality from the first installment, we hope to make the next installment even better in quality that can make for an even better experience. We would like to get it out as soon as possible, so please wait for it. I think we can clearly convey the direction when we officially announce the next installment." Honestly, I hope they do still take their time with the next part overall, especially with everything going on right now. I'd rather have a product that takes a bit longer, that takes into account the health and safety of the employees, than one that's rushed. But we'll have to wait and see. Toriyama also spoke a tiny bit about Roche, the character that appears in Chapter 4 as sort of a rival for Cloud. In a small quote, Toriyama said, "There is a very high chance that Roche will be reappearing in the next installment." We have some small general bits here from this interview now, 3 small facts in particular. First of all, the next installment is already in full development. Secondly, which makes me kind of laugh, apparently they couldn't go any further with the Madame M massage scene, otherwise ratings would go up. That's pretty hilarious. What I find the most interesting though is that Roche apparently was going to have a fight in Chapter 14. It did feel sort of odd to me how Roche sort of just shows up once and then disappears after Chapter 4, not even a full-on mention. I wish we could have gotten this fight in all honesty. But that's everything from these interviews with Famitsu. It's great to hear more updates about the development of Part 2, as well as getting some more insight about the future of the project from a story perspective, even if it does make me legitimately kind of nervous. I'm also very happy to hear that Roche is possibly going to be returning too, since I felt him barely having a presence in Part 1 felt a little bit off. But we're done here. So with that said, what did you all think of the interviews? Also, where do you think Part 2 should end story-wise? Let me know down below. Thank you all very much for watching, have a great night, and signing off. Peace out, soldiers.